Nostalgia can be quite the drug. You may have a fond memory of specific events or a time in your life that resonates with you stronger than others. In some ways, it may help push you through the many hardships when things get tough, yet in the same breath, can also cripple your development by playing things safe and sticking with what works, opting out of trying new things. Fans of a specific franchise or brand oftentimes gravitate to something they have a strong nostalgia for. You may have grown up with Nintendo and assume that Mario by default is the one and done Jumpman, the gold standard. You may have grown up a PlayStation fan and never had the opportunity to dabble into some of those sweet first-party titles only the likes of Nintendo can offer. You may feel a specific generation of gaming had a superior aesthetic or superior gameplay collectively, whether that be modern or retro. These are choices that will ultimately define our experiences. We can easily fall into our own personal biases when it comes to our favorites, and oftentimes we don't realize we're doing it. In order to critique or review something in a constructive manner, you oftentimes have to put those biases aside to form an objective viewpoint to better understand something entirely foreign to you. A fresh perspective on a new IP or rising company is exciting. Remember what it was like when we first laid eyes on the PS1 or perhaps the Nintendo GameCube. Both went on to be extremely influential in gaming culture. Both systems introduced us to hardware breakthroughs that still influence game development today. What these systems have in common is that they weren't afraid to go outside the box and try new things, especially when it comes to the GameCube. Competition sparks creativity. I'm that guy that prefers Mario 2 over Mario 3. Sonic 2 over Super Mario World, and Mega Man 7 over Mega Man 2. These are controversial takes, but they're just my opinions, and if you're watching this video, chances are you may lend me yours, and by all means, please leave a comment. What I'm trying to say is that as an individual, you should never be afraid to fail. When we consistently play things safe when it comes to new releases, it only limits our artistic outlets. There was that renaissance period in gaming where companies took risks with their IPs. Although they didn't all relatively go over well, some undoubtedly flopped completely. Many are now considered revolutionary for their time. Some will always be duds. Let's just face it, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Without taking those risks, we would never be rewarded. So, coming full circle with today's video, I believe this is why the Sega CD is so integral to our gaming culture. It was a peripheral that Sega took a risk on, and if they didn't, we may never have gotten the gem we all know and love more distinctively today as Sonic CD. With the bulk of the remaining Sonic 1 cast headed to the US to work alongside the new Sega Technical Institute for the upcoming Sonic 2, Sega Japan wanted a brand new Sonic title to launch alongside the powerful new Sega CD add-on for the Genesis. As a result, Naoto Oshima stayed behind in Japan and would go on to be lead director on this new Sonic CD project. Utilizing the original Sonic the Hedgehog as code for its base, Sonic CD would first go into development as an enhanced port of Sonic the Hedgehog with the code name CD Sonic the Hedgehog. Yet over time, this project would slowly blossom into something entirely unique. Where Sonic the Hedgehog 2 took the groundwork from its predecessor and heightened its speed and level design, Oshima took Sonic CD into a far more platform-heavy direction, placing emphasis on exploration and travel. The team achieved this by implementing a time travel gimmick throughout the experience. This idea would come to Oshima after watching the pop culture phenomenon Back to the Future, finding Sonic now traveling back to the past to correct events that led to this horrific future event. Now, funny enough, with that said, canonically, the team does not consider Sonic CD a sequel to Sonic the Hedgehog, but more so a story set somewhere between the two. With a new Sonic in the works, we would naturally see new faces come to life, like the introduction of fan favorites Amy Rose and Metal Sonic. These awesome new characters would be designed by lead artist Kazuyuki Hoshino. Many team members would contribute fun ideas along the way while concept art was being sketched out. Amy's headband and sneakers would be largely inspired by Oshima's own unique taste and style, with her mannerisms depicted by the qualities and personality Hoshino looks for in a woman. Hey man, look, I'm just the messenger. Hoshino would design the one and only Metal Sonic around the blueprint Oshima had in mind of a true rival character for Sonic. Sonic CD is quite the hefty game in size, 21 megabytes to be exact, compared to Sonic 2's 1 megabyte. This would also factor in those sweet animated cutscenes produced by Studio Junio, and special stages that took advantage of those Killer Mode 7-esque backgrounds to give this entry a distinct look and feel. Sonic CD was technically the very first time Sonic spoke in game. It's now been removed in later releases, but at one time, Sonic had a voice, and it appeared he spoke his mind during this brand new adventure. If the game wasn't large enough already, there was apparently a scrapped underground dungeon that will go on to be cut early in development as the team felt it just didn't fit into the overall scheme of things. The Sonic CD soundtrack is an interesting story to tell. We essentially received two entirely unique soundtracks upon release. The original Japanese score, composed by Naofumi Hataya and Masafumi Ogata, who at one moment in time worked alongside one another on the infamous 8-bit release of Sonic 2. I did a whole breakdown of that debacle in a previous episode if you guys care to partake in that. Naoto Oshima wanted to really spice things up this time around for Sonic's latest outing and began experimenting outside the box a bit with the overall sound. He tasked his team with bringing Sonic CD something a bit more current and trendy, something inspired by the latest club and house sound, which was rising in popularity on the Japanese and UK scene. It's here that we are introduced to the now infamous theme, "You Can Do Anything," but more so known as that sweet toot toot Sonic sound. Sega of America would go on to delay the North American release of Sonic CD 2 months to be exact, in order to have a completely new soundtrack written and produced for the North American fanbase. This soundtrack would go on to be composed by Spencer Nielsen and David Young of Sega's multimedia studio. Sega of America's marketing division wanted to go with a sound a bit more rich and complex, and by doing so, would ultimately produce this album without the involvement or approval of Sega Japan. This is why stateside, we would go on to get Sonic Boom as our brand new opening theme song. Keeping with the time travel gimmick, the past tracks were composed using sample-based PCM audio rather than that fully CD quality audio you would traditionally hear. This managed to give off more of that primitive twang to the environments. This was actually kept in both versions of the OST. I'm assuming to keep that feeling intact across multiple regions, or they just ran out of time on them completely. Speaking of time travel and going to the past, we need to now figure out how Sonic got himself into this timely situation to begin with. Legend has it that once a year, the mysterious little planet surfaces above the beautiful Never Lake. This phenomenon occurs over a span of approximately 1 month and maintains position over the lake due to the power of the 7 mystical gemstones that are referred to as the Time Stones. These stones are capable of contorting space and time, creating time paradoxes, altering the very fabric of reality. Eggman gets wind of the legendary stones, anticipating the planet's annual return. When the opportunity presents, he builds a fortress atop Little Planet, harnessing its power in efforts to control time itself. To achieve this fate, Eggman anchors Little Planet to a nearby mountain, encapsulating it with a cold metallic shell. As he slowly builds his base of operations, he uses the temporal passages of Little Planet to travel to the planet's distant past, placing robot transporters all throughout to ensure a robotic future of his own. So essentially his very own Biff Tower. You got that, McFly? Unbeknownst to Sonic, he travels to the Never Lake in efforts to see Little Planet, only to find that it has now become a robotic utopia with Eggman being the prime suspect. Without hesitation, Sonic dashes his way up the chains that holds Little Planet captive and makes his way into the heart of the planet in search of the missing time stones. With a backpack full of plutonium, he sets his flux capacitor to 1955 in efforts to destroy some gnarly robot transporters and save Little Planet's future. Right out the box, Sonic CD feels like it jumped off the heels of Sonic 1. It absolutely plays like a direct follow-up from the stage themes themselves to the artistic approach. Sonic dons his OG Sonic 1 fit, along with his traditional bag of power-ups. The Power Shield, Speed Shoes, and Invincibility all return. We even arrive back at each zone with the traditional 3-act layout. Due to the story aspects and primary structure of the zones themselves, they heavily focus on exploration, finding outlets to build up momentum to get you to and from the various time periods. Where Sonic 2 relied heavily on a linear layout to capture top speeds along various segues, Sonic CD relies on building short bursts in order to maintain it long enough to time travel, just as Doc Brown would in Back to the Future, attempting to get the DeLorean up to 88 miles per hour to pass the speed threshold to skip through time. In order to gain additional speed, Sonic now has a super peel out that finds him moving his legs in a circle pattern to build up speed while remaining stationary, only to then take off in a flash. The Spin Dash also makes a return with that Sonic 1 flavor added to it. It doesn't quite give you that same burst of speed that you are accustomed to from Sonic 2. Fans have gone on record criticizing this form of the Spin Dash as an almost inferior technique, but I will say here and now, again, this game isn't built for top speed, and I believe the technique is far better suited for the Sonic 1 engine. The build-up feels far better for the specific design throughout, and honestly, it's really not that bad. The zones here are designed to branch out in a vast assortment of paths in an effort to locate the robot generators, and a vast assortment of traditional power-ups we have come to love. Now, with that said, how do we manage to locate these generators Sonic is in search of? Well, in order to do so, we first gotta get into Doc Brown mode. Throughout the first 2 zones, Sonic will locate time warp signs, label past for traveling back to, well, Little Planet's past, and future to travel into an altered good or bad future dependent of your actions thus far. By touching a time warp sign, Sonic will then begin to run at a set speed, beginning to sparkle as if struck by lightning for a short period of time. Do you see where I'm going with this? If you can maintain your speed and sparkle while managing to not crash in the specific amount of time required, you will enter a time warp and end up in your desired time period. Your goal is essentially to travel to the past and locate those pesky robot generators and destroy them, creating a good future. There are 2 generators located in each zone, 1 generator per act for each of the first 2 acts. Destroying both will grant you a good future for that zone and will further solidify a good future when entering Act 3. This is very fun, and you can have 2 entirely different outcomes when facing off against Robotnik in each respective zone. Zone 3 will always take place in the future by default, but depending on your actions thus far, will change the outcome as you reach Eggman. You can face him in the bad future where he has seized control of Little Planet, or opt out to face him in a good future, one that is completely thriving. It's an amazing sight to see. You also find these odd Metal Sonic holograms throughout. I believe destroying these projectors will reveal the truth to your furry companions, and they will no longer fear you. Now again, Sonic CD is all about choosing your own fate, and with that said, there are multiple ways to go about your playthrough. You can take some additional time and explore the zone's ins and outs, seeking out the robot transporters, or you can go the Sonic 1 route and hold on to your 50 rings as you cross the finish line, jumping through those beautiful oversized engagement rings for Amy. As with Sonic 1, you will teleport into special stages, seeking out the time stones themselves in efforts to alter reality. Yes, you got your own set of Infinity Stones, so use them wisely. In order to gather them, you must track down these odd flying UFOs that hover around the astral plane. You have an extremely short amount of time to spin attack into them, and various hazards come into play while attempting to do so. You navigate through springs and bumpers that bounce Sonic up and back, while fans will have you hover through the air. Chopper blocks will shave down your time, and dash zones will redirect you on contact. The absolute worst hazard is the water. If you as much as dip your toe in, you're losing a significant amount of time. The first 4 stages aren't too bad, while the last 3 stages are downright dreadful, and after you've collected a few stones, the UFOs start to shimmy and shake as if they are wide receivers running past the defensive line. You just can't catch them. Some increase your time, but that's just more work, and with the infinite amount of hazards, as a newcomer, your best bet is to locate the robot generators throughout the stages. These are a blast to try out, but unless you have some decent practice, these aren't the way to go. Trust me, get all 7 of these, and then tell me how bad the half pipe is in Sonic 2. Now, let's look at these zones themselves, shall we? The zones of Sonic CD are absolutely stunning visually, some of the best of the classic series. Although I prefer the themes of the linear layout Sonic 2 took, for those that love the Sonic 1 aesthetic, I think you will really love these. My biggest takeaway from my initial playthrough was that oftentimes the exploration can be weighed down by inconsistencies in design. Many of the stage assets can begin to blend together, and you can get lost in the many inconsistencies throughout. Palm Tree Panic is a breezy tropical setting layered with mountains and waterfalls throughout. It's very reminiscent of Green Hill Zone and will constantly put you in your Sonic 1 feels. This is where you will need to learn the game's physics early on in order to get a greater understanding of time travel across various periods. The past here resembling an almost prehistoric feel to it that sort of paints a picture of Little Planet's thriving origins. As you time travel, the good and bad future slowly becomes mechanized over time, but with a twist. In the bad future, we are greeted to a time filled with industrial waste, smog fills the skies, and oil runs off the lands polluting the water systems. Yet if you play your cards right, you will change course and battle Eggman in an all-new light. It is here that Sonic meets Amy Rose, who has followed Sonic to Little Planet, who has predicted her own fate through the use of her tarot cards. It's a cute scene with Amy eagerly latching onto Sonic as she attempts to lock our young hedgehog down at first sight. Sonic continues to charge into collision chaos with Amy hot on his heels. Here our zone opens with our new counterpart being kidnapped by this new Metal Sonic character, a robotic doppelganger of our blue hero created by Eggman, hell-bent on besting our blue boy at every turn. Sonic attempts to rescue Amy, but Metal escapes, setting the stage for our adventure to unfold. This zone is a mechanized force field that has over time been converted to a jazzy new casino parlor, very reminiscent of Casino Night. It has a lot of personality throughout. The bad future is quite disturbing and covered in a dark machine world setting, yet flipping the switch and changing your fate can really bring out the flashing lights, and you'll have a great time bouncing throughout under the bright pink and blue pinball paradise. Title Tempest is my least favorite stage. Unfortunately, another glorified labyrinth zone full of underwater ruins. Honestly, do we really need another water stage at this point? Aquatic Ruin is really the only time they truly got it right. Why continue to break up your gameplay for the sake of implementing a water stage theme? Especially with a game built around time travel, the water levels will continue to rise and fall depending on the time period. It's not quite as frustrating to travel through as Labyrinth Zone, yet attempting to locate the proper time post and then carry that momentum forward can really get tedious. In the past, we discover rich underground caverns that, if not protected, becomes a wasteland for Robotnik in the foreseeable future. The crystalline mines of Quartz Quadrant is a crafty interconnected tunnel system filled with conveyor belts and unique stage pieces. Depending on the year, the environment drastically alters from being an active mine system to a swampy Everglade. It's a fun stage to travel, and in the good future, you're a marvel at the scenery itself, journeying through a golden utopia made of the finest quartz. The end stage encounter with Robotnik is hella creative too, and I always get a chuckle outpacing his invention along the conveyor belts. Eggman freaks out the very moment his machine begins crashing down inch by inch. Wacky Workbench is a heavy-duty construction field located deep inside a Grand Canyon equipped with, well, wacky action. You bounce anywhere and everywhere with fields of electricity scattered about that are a true pain in the ass to deal with. This is where again I stress, if you don't take the time to get accustomed to the time travel physics and the stage layouts themselves, you're going to have a bad time. It's pretty close to impossible to time travel without becoming completely overwhelmed by the obstacles, and you're most likely resort to collecting rings by the end of the act to tackle the special stages instead. The Eggman encounter itself uses the stage assets and incorporates them into the boss battle. It's not a challenging fight at all, and the zone itself is hands down the most forgettable of the 7. Stardust Speedway is a complete gem and is well known today as one of the more iconic classic stages, a supercharged highway that intertwines throughout the skies high above the big city. Covered in musical flair and endless charm, you'll discover an oversized statue of Eggman being built honoring the new Badnik behemoth. The past by far is where you want to spend your time, traveling throughout an ancient city covered in lush vines that wrap around the marble roads. Fast forwarding to the future, things become pretty corrupt around the city, now a cesspool completely run down by Eggman, who now finally has a statue finished and on display in the center of the city. If you manage to create a good future, you will be treated to some lively attractions covered in bright pink and green hues, emanating throughout with a gorgeous cathedral that replaces the robust Eggman statue. Sonic will eventually cruise through the high-speed expressway, coming face to face with Metal Sonic. Sonic will be pitted in a 1v1 quarter-mile race across the Stardust streets on a collision course with a rigged finish line. As you peel out, Eggman gives chase right on your tail. You need to time your jumps with precision in order to keep along the roads with just enough clearance to maneuver past the various road hazards ahead. You must do this all while Metal Sonic spools up his turbo for an electrically charged overdrive assault. As the finish line draws near, Sonic will slide through the exit doors just in time for them to come crashing down on Metal, allowing Sonic to free Amy trapped on the other side. Without hesitation, Sonic marches forward into Eggman's metallic madness. The name quite literally sums it up, a base of operations where he continues to suck the life force out of Little Planet. This zone can be a handful, full of gimmicky sections, whether it's the flywheels from Gimmick Mountain or lasers that shrink our hero down to fun size. It's a blast traveling the various corridors filled with mechanical gadgets and transport tubes throughout. In the past, Eggman's base was still in the early construction phase, yet if you end up with a bad future, things can get out of hand quickly, as his sinister base has now decayed over time, causing Sonic to plot his every move. As you enter Robotnik's stronghold, you encounter his latest endgame weapon, the Egg Spinner. This fight is no death egg encounter. His patterns are far more predictable, and he's pretty easy to take down with a little patience. Watch for the blades as they descend. Eggman is able to rotate and throw them towards you, or even ride them like a pogo stick. Sonic easily makes light work of this embarrassment of a final boss, triggering a chain reaction that causes Eggman's base to implode, allowing Little Planet's metallic shell to crumble from within. Our ending depends on our action throughout the adventure. If Sonic has not secured a good future by destroying the robot generators or collecting all 7 time stones, Eggman retreats on his hovercraft with a time stone, getting the last laugh. Sonic will chuck some fallen debris at Eggman, striking his vehicle and causing it to explode. As our adventure closes, a text will appear: try again. However, if we do manage to secure a good future, Sonic watches on as Little Planet fades away, leaving behind sparks in the shape of our hero's face, this time getting a much more satisfying end screen. Sonic CD is one of those titles that I find a greater appreciation for the older I become. The more time I invest in it, the more I slowly understand Sega's approach that much more. I think having the opportunity to initially play through the game on classic mode with Sonic and reliving my early frustrations, only to go back through it again with the likes of Tails, Knuckles, and Amy, gave me the proper experience with it that I can genuinely say there's so much more here to be told. The amount of exploration this game offers is where I find it shines the brightest. My biggest gripe is still the level designs themselves. At times they just feel repetitive in approach and a chore to backtrack through discovering a way into the past. This can easily make you want to step away from it, yet as you continue to play through, the more effort you will place into exploration, you begin to really marvel at the little things Sonic CD offers: the beautiful color palette, the tiny attention to detail throughout the various time periods. The enemies all feel like a natural evolution in the series design. The killer music tracks all remixed accordingly to the time periods you embark on, the little metal Sonic holograms you run up on, and the fun you have switching between the super peel out and the spin dash on the fly. Even the little extras that we have lost to time, like Sonic's 3-minute warning, is such a fun quirky bonus. The cutscenes themselves to this day are still some of my favorite animated scenes for Sonic. The game was quite literally ahead of its time, and coming out on a peripheral like the Sega CD, you could see why this game has been criminally misunderstood for so many years. Although we have a vast amount of ways to play through it today, it's one of those titles that I can pick up and will make the experience feel brand new to the touch. The UFO stages are absolutely flawed, but they have so much charm wrapped up in them. I still just love looking at the various scenarios. The added sprites for Tails, Knuckles, and Amy throughout are just wonderful. Sonic CD was that game I would purchase as a kid and unfortunately leave on my shelf for many years. I never had the opportunity to purchase a Sega CD until years later, so from the very beginning, this entry had a mystique to it I believe still carries with it today. Every time I pick it up and give it another go, I feel as if I have traveled to another timeline playing through this all over again. I might play through it with a Japanese OST or switched up going with the North American tracks. I'm finding brand new secrets and Easter eggs still to this day, and as my time with Sonic CD draws to an end for now, we continue to experiment on with Sega's hardware, now in the form of the all-new lock-on technology. When we return, we will be looking at our Blue Hedgehog's grandest adventure yet. Thanks for watching.